Wrong cam. I'm Richard Holder. Welcome. It is 7:11. I'm a couple minutes late because I was just on the podcast with Lewis, playing a card or playing in traffic, and very cool. Got to see Terry and meet a bunch of guys there, which was very, very cool. He's been doing it for 8 years, so congratulations, man. 8 years strong. That is awesome. And thank you for having me on there. That was a lot of fun. I had to jump over and do my thing over here. So hopefully you guys are going to tune in. I've got a video that I put up today on all motor LS stuff. I'm surprised. It's very popular. It's doing very well, which I'm very happy about. But you know, the thing is just add boost to that, really. And honestly enough, a couple of those motors did get boost. So even though they were very powerful NA combinations, particularly both of the 5.3s, one of them got lots and lots of nitrous, too much. Well, not enough fuel, but too much nitrous and too foolish of an operator. That's this guy. The 4.8 got boost, the high horsepower 4.8 deal, because it's easy to make power if you with a turbo or a blower or anything else if you start out with a very high horsepower naturally aspirated motor, which we did on those. So the 4.8 got very close to making 100 horsepower per liter and could very well have done it. I wasn't trying to do that at the time that we did that test. I just put heads, cam, and intake on it. We were just kind of seeing where things would go. I never even measured where the piston was in the bore. We didn't check anything. We just put gaskets on it and stuff. I didn't optimize the cam. The 4.8 had a fairly small camshaft and a 224 cam. Although that cam, I have to say that crane cam that I used many, many times, it always worked very well. It always made good power. The fast intake manifold always worked very well. That 4.8 made peak power even with that 224 cam and a fast long runner intake manifold at 7,100 RPM. So it was doing fairly well, but I think milling the heads and certainly a bigger camshaft would have pushed it. I think we could get that thing near 500 horsepower even with the stock short block. We're limited in basically what kind of cam timing we can use because of available piston to valve clearance in all of these, in the 4.8, the 5.3, and the 6.0. On the 5.3, I showed two combinations. One was the precursor to the Big Bang nitrous motor with the Brian Tooley camshaft, and then the ASCAS 220 heads, and then a high ram because I wanted to run two plate systems on it. And also, I wanted to try to minimize torque production in that, which we did. We extended the thing out to make a decent peak number over 500 horsepower while minimizing torque production. And then you saw the converse of that was, and I should have done the same thing, was run with trick flow 215s and a 459 camshaft, and then but a fast intake manifold, the fast LSXR or LSXRT, which by the way, those make the same power on the 5.3 as the precursor to running the two turbos on it for the 5.3 Big Bang that I did for Truckin' Magazine way back. That thing made over 1,300 horsepower. So it started off making 500. So getting to 13 was not a big deal, even though I didn't have ice water going through it at the time. I had two 76 millimeter turbos, which were not a fantastic choice. In fact, if you go back and look at that, you'll see, and I don't know if I mentioned it in the video. I think that I did in the original story, but we used just shorty headers on it from JBA, shorty 5.3 truck headers. And then one side had a 2.5 inch going to the turbo. The other had a 3 inch going to the turbo. We just do what I always do. We just used what we had basically laying around, not something that was optimized. But those did well, and the 5.3 was the least powerful in terms of specific output of all of these, even though it made more than the 4.8 did. But for its displacement, it made only 94, or just right at 94.9, 95 horsepower per liter. The 4.8 was 99.1, and then we got right near 99.5 horsepower per liter, right near 100 with the 6 liter. But what I wanted to illustrate in that is that, because I get asked a lot, and a lot on the 6 liter now, I think that they think that the 6 liters should make 600 horsepower flywheel, and they will. You just have to put everything at them. We had to put really good heads on it. In that case, we had Airflow Research 230s, the LSX V2s. and we had really good heads. We had a good intake manifold on it. We ran, the reason that I built that motor, we had forged pistons and forged rods, CP Corolla stuff with valve reliefs. I should have run more camshaft in it. I don't think that I did. I'm thinking back, and it may not have had a 469 camshaft. It may have had something a little bit bigger. I'm almost thinking that it had a 239 camshaft in it, but that's not what the note said. So I'm a little conflicted. But it should have had a bigger camshaft in it so that we could push that thing over 600 horsepower. It had enough compression. It had enough head flow. It had enough intake. That thing could have been, I think, and should have been over 600 horsepower. But it goes to show you that you're not going to get a junkyard 6-liter and throw a camshaft in it and make 600 horsepower. That's not going to happen. No matter what somebody's magic camshaft tells you that that's going to happen, it's not going to happen. You'll be lucky to get with a camshaft on the 6-liter. You'll be, especially with a 317 head, it's definitely not going to happen, or a 799 head. It's going to be low 500s. With a good head, like a Recport head, like the LY6 was, you could be mid 500s. With a good head, you can be mid to high 500s, and then with everything thrown at it like we did, you can, to get up near 600, it takes a lot of things. It takes a lot of stuff to be right. And then with the 5.3, with the 500 horsepower 5.3 with a fast manifold on it, we ran turbos on that because it didn't have high compression in it. It wasn't. It was you know, it was still near factory. I can't remember exactly what the chamber was on the 215 head, but I think it was comparable certainly to. It's not going to be any smaller than a 706 head was. It might even be a little bit bigger than that. So if anything, it might have been a little bit lower compression than factory. And then that's why we had that boost to it. So 276 millimeter turbos, an air-to-water intercooler, the 2-in and single out that we run, the CX Racing one, big injectors, race fuel. We didn't run E85. E85 would have pushed it up, could have pushed it up a little farther. And I think we could have made a lot more power with that combination had we run the 5.3 with the S475 turbos and ice water and probably E85. And I think that I think I'd be interested to see what a 5.3 would be now, knowing what I know and applying the things that we have now, like just those 2 big Borg turbos would be a big step up compared to the other ones. We were running into issues with the other turbos when we were running these big bang motors, and I solved that when we went to the first 6-liter, and that thing made 1482 like nothing, and then blew up. which again, that also might have been my fault. Yes, it definitely is the wrong cam. So we need to get a poll going. We'll change that a little bit. Okay, I gotta put a capital in here. So the poll is it impossible to make 600 NA horsepower with a 4.8 liter? I'm gonna make this a little bit more difficult. With a stock bottom end 4.8 liter. So now let's see what our poll people think. And let's see what you guys got going on. The NA motor thing is actually doing fairly well. I think people like, although I did get knuckle dragger comments about that I need to speak English because I use metric numbers, even though the 4.8 is a 4.8, which is a metric number. The 5.3, the 6.0, they've been those metric numbers since before the LS. I mean, back when we had 5 liters and 5.7s, they've been using those designations. But no, you got to call it a 350 or a 293 or a 320. Nobody calls a 5.3 a 324 or a 325 or a 326 or whatever number it is. I do have a few people call the 6-liter a 364 on occasion, but normally it's a 6-liter or a 6.2 or a 7-liter. Some guys will want to say 427 because that does really sound cool if you have a 427 LS, but not a 293. Nobody calls it that. Question for a drive-by-wire, drive-by-cable. In my opinion, I hate the Holley Terminator X Max, so I can go either way with my swap. I never run, well, not never. When I run LS motors, I don't run drive-by-wire stuff. I would only do that if whatever combination, like it was a crate motor or something. We've done that on the Coyote, and I've done that on the LT motor, and not on the, I don't think on the Atlas motor. We've only done it when we had to run like a factory style ECU that required that. Otherwise, if I run a Holley on it, which I do normally an HP or a Dominator, everything gets a manual throttle body. I don't like suggesting to the ECU that the throttle open or close. I like telling it. I like being in control. So when I want wide open throttle, I want it to be wide open throttle. When I want the throttle closed, I want it closed. I don't want sending a suggestion to the ECU and going, well, you don't really want wide open throttle. What you meant to say was, no, I meant wide open throttle. So that's one of the reasons that I like manual throttle bodies. What about an NA build that I plan on boosting later? It's the same as any NA build is the same. Should have had a bigger cam. On an NA build, it should. If you're going to try to make NA power, you need a bigger cam. And we talked about that last night when I was talking about with Nitrous. With Nitrous, I almost always recommend the bigger cam, because with Nitrous, you want to make as much power as you can, NA, then you add to that. So if you're trying to get to a big number, start out with a big number and then add Nitrous, and then your number is even bigger. You mentioned you believe 232 is a piston to valve question. It's in the area where I would certainly measure it. It makes me think fly cutting my piston in case of float with my TFS 215s and the 235, 239 on a 111. You should definitely measure that. I just got off the dyno with a K24 on M5 race fuel, made 256 torque to the wheels. ITB, huge cam, should make 450 wheel horsepower on 50/50, and then you'll boost it. 450 would be a lot NA for a K24. Richard, quick question about oil pumps. Running a high volume oil pump on an NA 6 liter is that a problem? I don't know why you would need to do that, unless for some reason when you put it together, you ran very like big bearing clearances. Mike's in the house. And you are definitely gone. I was surprised that 5.3 had the worst horsepower per liter of the bunch despite having the most cam. When will we see the final LS Big Bang? Oh, like the 6 liter one? I love the people that, Jonathan, and this is directed at you, I love people that point out that somebody from some manufacturer copied something from some manufacturer, and that so that therefore the other manufacturers should get all the credit for the success of this guy that took this thing and ran with it. That's just silly. If you go back and look at all of the engineers who moved from one manufacturer to the other, they all work for everybody. And also there are people can come up with stuff independently, and also they can just outright steal it. All of that stuff can happen, but that's all part of the industry. What's the fuel for the pole? You can run whatever fuel that you want, just not nitromethane. I have a Texas Speed low lift max. Having experience with that cam. It's a 228, 550 lift. That's a low lift cam. One thing I don't like is that it's a single pattern cam. I don't know what the LSA is in it on it, so I can't really say. I've never tested that camshaft. traditionally I don't really like single pattern cams as much as I like dual pattern cams. A 228 cam, a 228, 230, and then a 585 lift is what the sloppy stage 2. So we see how that kind of works. That one is going to be slightly off from the, depending on the LSA, slightly off from the sloppy stage 2, but similar because it has the same intake duration. Michael just finished installing a new suspension on the BMW. Excellent. I'm happy to hear it. Fully built NAK24 on a high percentage of nitromethane can make 750 wheel horsepower. I haven't seen numbers like that from the guys at Skunk. Should I turn my high pressure, high volume oil pump if I'm running stock clearances? You don't need that pump if you have stock bearing clearances. Support from Victor Harbour, South Australia. Welcome. Don't worry about it. The thing is that with oil pumps, like more pressure and more volume is not necessarily good. And Dan's right. It can also drain your pan possibly, depending on how the drain back is. My new cam lifters came in today. Waiting on the AFR 265s. Infamous Nova's in the house. Ooh, took the Aprilia to Jersey Mike's for supper. They have good subs there. And an Aprilia is very cool. Got to talk to NASCAR guys for the poll. So what is let's figure out what divided by 4.8. It's 125 horsepower per liter. That's certainly possible. That's 2.04 horsepower per inch. Again, that's possible, but that's why I put the caveat in there. Because if you just say, is that possible? It is possible. Because 2 horsepower per cubic inch is not every day, but it's certainly possible. But doing it with a stock bottom end would be difficult because it limits you to how much camshaft you can run. What happens with too much oil pressure? You can blow your oil filter off, and you use a lot of. It takes power also to do it. Are high volume pumps a good idea for feeding turbochargers with oil? If you have I wouldn't mind using a high volume or even a high pressure. In my opinion, I think that they do the same thing. When I'm running a T off to 2 turbos, because we definitely see a drop in oil pressure when we're feeding the turbos, because that's just an oil leak. So I wouldn't mind doing that. Are you serious about the NA? I see people talking about turbos and the description is weird. I don't know what you mean. I don't know what your question is. A TSP stage 2 LS3 cam, my 6 liter for an LS swap. That's probably a good cam. I'm not that familiar exactly what the specs are. Stage 2 though is better than a stage 1. Ben, at what oil pressure will an oil filter blow off? 127.4 psi. I don't know. Mario, that doesn't really make sense. You put 5W30 oil in it and it idles at 40 PSI, but with 1040 on it, it idles at 35. It should be the other way around. What's the largest cam you can run in an NA53? You have to measure it. It's not lift, and it's actually not just duration. It's I think it's the, where's the intake going to hit? Is it going to be the opening? The intake is the one that's going to hit. The exhaust is not going to hit. We've run 250 degrees of exhaust duration on these things, but somewhere in the low to mid 230s is kind of where it seems to get into trouble. Well, Ben, I wanted to be, exacting. Put 2 of those experimental K24 intakes where you had injectors in the middle of the stacks and it's scavenging exhaust. So you want to put injectors in the exhaust? I LS swapped my 05 Trailblazer. I'm trying to use the stock tank. I'm having issues venting the tank with the stock. I'm sure that's EGR system. Is there a way I can vent it by bypassing the EGR system? I don't know. I'd have to look at the diagram to see what it is that you're talking about. Can you just vent it to atmosphere? Ethan, how much power do you think I can make safely with forged rods and pistons, stock crank, a sloppy stage 3 cam? So I'm assuming that with your forged pistons, you have valve release for that sloppy stage 3 cam. That's the wrong cam. That's the wrong cam for a GT45 turbo. Not that you need a turbo cam, but I would recommend a smaller cam, especially with 317 heads, because it's just going to be soft. When you say stock bottom end, do you mean stock long buck? No, stock SBE stands for stock bottom end. That's the lower part. You can put heads, cam, and intake on it. I know you're thinking money to get 600 horsepower crank from a 4.8. I don't think you can do it. I don't think you could get 600 horsepower from a 4.8 with a stock bottom end. I don't think that's possible. I just don't think you can put enough camshaft in it to do it. There's certainly enough cylinder head. There's cylinder heads that you could put on there that flow way over 300 CFM. And good ones, even ones that are not gigantic in port volume. There's a lot of cathedral heads that you could put on there that flow that much. There's lots of good intake manifolds. The problem is, I don't think you can get enough camshaft in it to do that. TSP cam's a 229, 244. That's a good performance cam. They always seem to put, the guys from Texas Speed seem to put a lot of lift, especially in the intake cam. The stock 5.3 can handle 10 pounds of boost without ring gap. We have run 10 pounds of boost. As a matter of fact, I've done it on I think I did it on the L33. We have run 10 pounds of boost without ring gap. But boost and ring gap are not the things that you need to worry about. You need to worry about temperature and ring gap, because that's what makes the ring go together, not boost. So if you run 10 pounds and you do it for half an hour, you're going to break it. The other thing about stock ring gap is that you don't know what that is. Is it 12? Is it 25? Is it somewhere in between? Jose, you have a LS2 with a Truck Norris cam and an 88 millimeter turbo on a 6-liter. I hate to say it, but I might use a little more camshaft than that on a 6-liter to get all of an 88, because the real 88 millimeter turbos could be 1,500 horsepower turbos. Are you trying to make that much power? Casey, I'm building a 5.3 now for the first time. I'm going to put it in an S10. I want to make it a nitrous motor, 2 kits, 600 horsepower. If you're going to run 2 kits of nitrous on anything, the motor should be built. You don't need 2 kits to make 600 horsepower from a 5.3. As we saw, you can make 500 horsepower with heads, cam, and intake on a stock bottom end 5.3, put ring gap in it, and then just add 100 shot to it, and then you have 600 horsepower. So you don't need to do it with that. We have run way over 700 horsepower with a 300 shot on a junkyard 5.3 that had a carbureted one. I think it just had a cam in it. So that's possible, but you don't need 2 kits to do that. You just need 1. Best bolt-on turbo kit for Trans Am? No idea. I don't usually test specific kits. What's the magic number for ring gap? Usually 6.5 thousandths per inch of bore. Jonathan, for stock bottom end, can I stud and billet the? You can, but it's not gonna. You won't need to do that to get there. But stock bottom end does mean stock bottom end. Have you ever thought about doing an all sloppy Elgin test, an E1841P? Is that the sloppy stage 1 and their truck torque cams? I didn't even know that they made truck torque cams. So you want to run a 5.3 and then you want to run a 600 shot of nitrous? I don't think that that's going to work very well. I saw your video about 100 horsepower per liter. Could this be done with a GM 8100? I think you can get a 496, which is what that is. You can make 800 horsepower or 810 horsepower with a 8100, not with heads, cam, and intake though. You won't do that with a stock bottom end on that. You need something that has to make 810 horsepower out of a 496. It's going to have to run a lot of RPM. It's going to have a big roller cam in it. It's going to have to have really, really good cylinder heads on it, and it's going to have a single plane or more than likely a tunnel ram intake manifold. Can you explain ring gap? Yes, you need ring gap. And if the ring gap is too tight, if it gets too hot, the rings pinch together and seize momentarily in the bore and it snaps the ring line. That's why you need more ring gap so that never happens. Uh, 6-liter LS2, 11-to-1, Pro Charger at 6 pounds, will a 68cc head with an LS9 head gasket. I don't know that the LS9 head gasket is going to bring the thickness of the head gasket. I think is probably the same as that LS2 is, but the bore size might be a little bit bigger. I'd have to do some research to see what the bore size difference is of those 2 gaskets. A 68cc chamber should bring it down. I'm thinking that the LS2 is probably 63 or so. Something streetable on a Trailblazer SS. What cam would you recommend? I want a Truck Norris. A Truck Norris is a good cam, but my question isn't that. That's a good streetable cam and it makes good power. I have videos up on what it does. My question is a combination of that camshaft and an 88mm turbo. When somebody puts an 88mm turbo in something, it usually means that they're trying to run 8s or 7s or 6s or something. If that's a street car, I wouldn't use an 88mm turbo. I'm building up 550 horsepower. What happened to it? I got lost here. Okay. Trick Flow 550 horsepower Gen X top end kit. And did you have a question about that? That kit works pretty well. What's the highest horsepower all motor Gen 3 Hemi you've heard of? I don't know. I'm not traveling in those circles, but probably maybe the maybe the Engine Master stuff that Bishop did, or one of those guys, maybe. Michael, I think 600 horsepower to 4.8 would be tough. We're talking max effort race engine. Yeah. I think the torque would be horrible, but individual throttle bodies, a big head like a 235 and a cam similar to a 235, 239, and a Gen 4 bottom end will do it. I don't know that you could put that camshaft in a stock 4.8 bottom end, but that head and that camshaft aren't going to make anywhere near 600 horsepower on a 4.8. It's impossible to make is it impossible to make 600 NA horsepower with a stock bottom end 4.8? What about the RPMs that would be needed with this low displacement NA to make the stated power level? You can run whatever RPM you want, but again, it's a stock bottom end, so you're limited in compression and you're limited in camshaft. LS9 cam, is the LS9 cam better in a 5.3 or a 6-liter? It's going to be much better in a 6-liter because it's going to be really, really soft in a 5.3. It makes pretty good peak power. It's going to be soft in a 6-liter too, especially an LQ4 that has a 317 head that's going to have low compression. Take a look at the video that I have up where I tested the LS9 versus a stock LM7 camshaft, and you can kind of see what I mean. Richard, you meant a 496 NA. Well, he was asking about an 8100, which is a 496. How streetable with Richard's 459? Actually, if anything, my favorite would be a 469, but that's not. It just happened to have been a camshaft that I used a whole bunch on a 408 and a 3400 stall. A 3400 stall would be fine with a 408 and that camshaft. LT channel is 8.1 stuff. Yeah, but not. He doesn't have 800 horsepower and NA stuff. Building an LQ9. I wanted your opinion on TrickFlow's top end kit. The TrickFlow top end kit works well. I think you can get a cheaper way to do it would be have an LQ9 with a flat top piston, find a set of used rec port heads and a LS3 intake manifold, and then put a camshaft in it. And I think you'd be way under the $4,100 price range, and you'd be really close on the power. Richard, can you test hydrogen combustion engines, please? That's probably fairly low on the list. I'm building stock 5.3 with Texas Speed Tsunami cam. Although I did talk to my buddy Bernie about some fairly cool hydrogen stuff that they're doing, which was really interesting. I obviously can't talk about it because it's top secret, but it's really, really kind of cool. I don't know about the Tsunami cam. I don't know what the specs are on it. I think the counter is at 192. Richard, have you ever participated in drag race? No, I've never built a drag race car. Only road race cars and Bonneville cars like this. I was just showing the guys on Playing in Traffic about, we were talking about Bonneville stuff. I keep getting ads for competition induction design LS intakes. They look really cool. The K24 cam is a 615 lift, and is the 280 duration at 50? That's a big number if it is. How many times do you think I can spray it? We ran a lot of nitrous through. If you have a stock bottom end that has ring gap on it, we ran a lot of shots through it before it finally broke. But because I never put ring gap in it, it was just a junkyard motor that we were running 300 shots on. Mr. Cobb, so is your question, is this going to make 1,000 wheel horsepower 416 LS3, stage 4 turbo cam, 823 heads, BSR 90? Yeah, 92-103 would certainly support that power level. It's good. A 92 is actually going to be bigger than 1,000 wheel horsepower, but if that's your goal, it will certainly do that. Stock bottom end means stock bottom end. Everything in the bottom end, the block, crank, rods, pistons. The question somebody clever should be asking is, if it's a stock bottom end, it means stock pistons. But can we cut valve reliefs in them? See, that somebody just did that. You like the 6L90E? I don't know that I've ever had any experience with one. Richard, do you own your shop? I don't have a shop, and I don't build engines for people. Cheating is allowed, so if you want to hide a a nitrous system under there. No, a stock bottom end would be stock. You can't do anything to it. That's why I put that in there, for limitations. My cam cleared with 76 thousandths clearance on the intake. Would you ball hone an engine and reinstall old rings? All the time. I've done every combination of that. We've mixed and matched rings in different bores. We have ball honed it and used new rings. We've ball honed it and used old rings. All of that stuff. I like how people are thinking that a Honda K24 is half of a Chevy 4.8 liter. It's more than half. Got my Gen 353 today, building for boost, aiming for 550 to 600 wheel horsepower, planning using a BorgWarner SX400 equivalent. Is it worth using 799 heads? No, you don't need to. I wouldn't use an LS1 intake. I would use a truck intake unless that one won't fit. Stock LS6 cam, that would be fine. Farm kid, would you ball hone an engine and solid rings? I notice improvement are not worth it for a build. To do what? To ball hone it? Ball hone it is a good idea. You think that one larger nitrous state is better than two smaller ones or vice versa? So are you mean activating one kit and then another kit? That's probably a little easier on it than just one big kit. But I've not tested that for durability. And I've run lots of nitrous on stuff, but usually what we put on is a 100 or 125 or some kind of shot like that. Fairly small jets, not multiple kits. I don't know that I've only ever tried multiple kits one time and with disastrous results because of me. Custom Deluxe, you can get 601 horsepower if you flip the pistons. That's right. How fast could a stock bottom end LY6 with that TSP cam spin? It's not going to want to make peak power at 6,700. It will rev that high, certainly. Why a truck intake with a turbo? Because a truck intake makes more power than an LS1 intake manifold does. If you see the the video that I put up where we tested all of the factory intakes and a whole bunch of other ones. The truck intake is way better than an LS1 intake manifold. It's not quite as good as an LS6. And then the Trailblazer SS is better than both of those, if you have that available to you, or the fast manifold is the best of all of them. But you really don't need that. If you, the reason I suggest truck is usually the truck intake comes with the 4.8s and 5.3s that we get out of the wrecking yard, and it will make lots of power. Love the video on boost. That video is doing fairly well. It's doing good. Thank you. Building an iron block 5.7, Gen 4 rods, LS6 pistons, ported 862 heads, 11.2. Now thinking about adding a 7675. Just make sure that you have lots of octane and an intercooler for that. Farm kit, is the motor, I'm maybe not understanding what you're doing. Is the motor already apart? If it's already apart and the pistons are out and you're going to put ring gap in it, then yeah, I would ball hone it. If the motor is still running right now, I wouldn't take it apart. I would just run it. Stock bottom end 4.8. Let's try to get 25 miles per gallon would not be hard, and depending on the car that you're in, of course. But 25 miles per gallon would not be that difficult. My four-wheel drive truck with a 5.3 will get 20 on the freeway, and probably I might be able to eke out 21. The LS4 would be the only intake that would be worse than an LS1. Is it worth throwing money at an NA stock bottom end? No, it's not. That's why I tell people, if you're going to put boost on it, you don't need heads and you don't need an intake. You just need a camshaft and springs. Miles per gallon with a big block Chevy. I think if we made a 300-inch big block Chevy, maybe we could do that. Do a search for LS intake test on my channel, and it will come up. The fan that you're hearing now might be this fan that's on. How much spring pressure can stock rocker arms take? How much spring pressure can LS7 lifters take? Maybe you're asking the wrong question. Why do you want a whole bunch of spring pressure? You're not going with a roller cam, obviously, if you're keeping the hydraulic roller lifters. Saw an old engine with ball bearing cranks. That's not the way to go. Shift my stock bottom and cam 6.2 nitrous 7600. Yeah, that we run junkyard stuff to 7500 all the time. Any specific cam you'd recommend for boost? No, it's not. Boost isn't the thing. You want to pick your camshaft for whatever you're trying to achieve. So are you trying to run lots of RPM? Then you pick a high RPM camshaft. Are you trying to, what are you trying to do with boost? How much power are you trying to make? And then also, how much drivability do you want? That's what you pick your camshaft for. So if you have a 1,000 horsepower turbo, you don't have to have a very big cam to make 1,000 horsepower. In fact, you can do it with a very small camshaft. And then you have better boost response and better drivability. Let's see. Trick flow heads versus stock heads. You don't need a head upgrade on an LS for a turbo application. They will make more power. They will make more NA power. But again, if you have a 1,000 horsepower turbo, if your needs are 1,000 horsepower or less, I don't recommend a head upgrade unless you're trying to increase the deck thickness for some reason. 40 miles per gallon. My sister's 2017 1.4 Cruise. That's pretty cool. The best I ever did was the Civic VX actually got better mileage than the little Sprint Turbo did. The Sprint Turbo would do low 50s, like 50, 51. But the VX, if driven properly on a long stretch of freeway, would do, I think the most I ever did was 56 and a half, I think. And that's not driving behind somebody or pulse gliding or going downhill or any of that. That's driving from Northern California to West Texas. Trunnion upgrades are a good idea. 243s do fit on a 4.8. Trunnion upgrades are a good idea, especially for really high mileage stuff like the stuff that I always get from the wrecking yard. 4.8 turbo, I put a couple of check valves in the stock PCV system and help. We vent all of our stuff to atmosphere. I don't run pressure into the system. How much boost have you run on an LS with stock deck heads? A couple of the big bang motors had ported stock heads, and those were run with head studs and not even CA625s and MLS head gaskets, and those were 26 pounds or so. Kyle, given 300 CFM heads, a high ram, pistons with reliefs, decent rods, 5.3 or 4.8, start with a stock cam, and keep adding duration RPM to see how close to 600 you can approach. So you're totally foregoing the stock bottom end piece. You just want to see if that can be done. Northern Cal to West Tech is downhill. When I was in the Azores, wow, just throwing that out there, Dan, like you're a seasoned traveler. The rental car was an Opel Corsa, some tiny little gasoline engine, shoe ball fire, 50 miles per gallon, nice. Really, realistically, if an all-motor LS is making 800 on the engine dyno, how much do you think it would be at the tire? Well, I want to start off with how do we get the all-motor LS to make 800 horsepower? The only one I've ever done that with was a really big one. It was a 495-inch one. I still have an RB25, yes. About venting the atmosphere, I did it in a smoke. But if it's smoking, that's not because of it's venting the atmosphere. That's because there's stuff in the crankcase that's trying to get out. I have always said about 25 psi for stock heads. The boost pressure has nothing to do with the cylinder heads. I mean, it is an indicator, but 25 psi with a stock cam is going to be completely different than 25 psi with a dedicated motor. The power difference could be 300 or 400 horsepower and a commensurate amount of torque. That's the thing you would need to be thinking about. You need to be thinking about cylinder pressure and some sort of big torque number. I haven't tried revving it beyond 7,100. Is it the thing is, and I know everybody wants to rev their motors, but is it making power past that? Let's see, my 88 Mustang GT 5-liter mod with a 5-speed and 308s will knock down 27 or 28. I think that's about where I was on my 5-liter with 308s in it. It did better before I put the camshaft in it. I do want to do more peanut port testing if people want to see that. How much extra pressure can you run on springs? Are you talking about on an LS? What are you talking about? Have you ever tested E85 versus 93? I've only tested E85 versus 91 because we don't have 93, but there would be no difference in power between 93 and 91 on a naturally aspirated motor. And I don't see a big change in power between E85 and 91 pump gas on any sort of NA motor that I've tested on. The only ones I've ever seen make power NA are Coyotes I've seen. And then also the LT motors seem to pick up power. But I've tested on small block Chevys, small block Fords, because I always run motors before we run boost on them. I always run them NA. And so we run them NA to start out with on 91 because they're all going to be, fairly realistic. They're all going to be pump gas motors when they're NA. So we run them NA on 91, and then I'll switch over to E85 because we're going to run boost on it. And then we switch over to E85, and there's very, very little change. There's a minor change in power, if anything. In your videos, you go about 7,100 RPM on the dyno with a stock bottom end. I don't know which. Are you talking about one particular video where we did that? Is it okay to go that far? Yeah, it's fine. We run that kind of RPM a lot. Richard, sounds like a miss when the engine warms up, but hit the 102 millimeter, it clears up. Any suggestions for clutches on 600 wheel horsepower? Richard, when do you think you'll do more land speed racing? I don't know. The next one that I want to do probably, I think I probably would do it in that Civic again. A D15B lean burn. Mine was a D15Z1 on the VX, and it doesn't open up the second valve at maximum piston speed. It's not related to engine speed. What they do is they do stagger the valve opening, but they're not going into. There's no VTEC in that motor. Well, there is VTEC in that motor. When you go into VTEC, then it's opening them both all the time, the same amount. When you're not doing that, it's offset opening them, but it's not related to engine speed. Built it in a garage. Yeah, the cylinder pressure is the thing that does it, because 25 pounds on one motor isn't 25 pounds on another motor. So the motor doesn't have any idea what boost pressure is. But but head sealing will have an idea of what cylinder pressure is, because we can run, and I usually use it at a much lower boost level. But if we run 15 pounds on a 300 horsepower motor, it's 600. If we run 15 pounds on a 800 horsepower motor, it's 1,600 horsepower with a commensurate jump in torque. They both have the same boost, but they have dramatically different cylinder pressures. Max wheel horsepower on rods, pistons, stock block, LS3. An LSA blower won't make enough power to, if you have it tuned properly, an LS3 will take more power than that LSA blower will be able to deliver. What causes piston slap? Yeah, usually it's actually going to be piston wear and not usually cylinder wear. When we take these things apart, usually the cylinder wear is very minimal. How do you think Borofsky? I don't know who that is. Build a 900 horsepower NA 427. Let's see how much. That's 2. That's 2.1. That's a lot. I mean, that's not the highest I've ever seen, but it is a lot. But the octane just allows you to run more compression. And so if that's an NA motor and it's making 2.1 horsepower per cubic inch, which is a lot, it's going to have very, very high compression. It's going to have more than likely some sort of weird canted valve head or something. It's going to have a really like a tunnel ramish or a stack injection on it, or a tunnel ramish style intake manifold. It's going to have a dry sump. It's going to have lots of things that help make that kind of power. The trophies in the back were land speed ones. Richard, the white lamp cord is getting pinched by your cabinet. It's not. It's just holding it. It's just gently caressing it. I'm porting and flow testing a few sets of peanut ports with different size valves. It's cool if you're interested in running them on a dyno. I'd be willing to work something out with you. Are you like really far away? Because I'm not interested in shipping iron peanut port heads anywhere. It would be $1 million just to ship them. But I'm interested in your flow data if you do some stuff. What if you had a 4-valve head on a 4.8? See, now you're thinking. I like that. Built 6-liter single turbo and a crew cab. Is it so good for towing? Yeah, with the right tune, it is. The fan right now isn't even in VTEC. It's got 2 more steps. Richard, run an LT4 4-valve Chevy ZL1 engine. An RV cam. That just means it's a mild camshaft that guys would have put in truck. It basically means truck cam that we think of now. My camera's freaking out again. Come on, stay with me. There you go. See, that wasn't hard. The Trophy 4 will get a turbo. It'll also get a blower on it, but not. I mean, it's not going to get 1,000,000 pounds of boost, but it should be fun. Are you a fan of a D-stroke 6-liter? I did a D-stroke, but mine wasn't a 6-liter. It was a D-stroke 6.2. So it was a 4.8 crank in an LS3 block. And it depends on how you look at it. If you go down in displacement from the 6.2, you're making less power. So de-stroking it loses power compared to a 6-liter or a 6.2. If you look at it the other way, that you're going up in bore size from a 4.8, then it's better. It's not as good as a 6-liter or a 6.2, but it is better than a 4.8. What can I do to make my Hyundai Genesis reliable with a turbo? The tune is the critical thing. Dr. Rod, so you did find the video good. I'm glad. My small block Chevy brush heads came with 987 springs. Cam says use 986 springs. What is the spring rate difference? Extra pressure is not going to hurt your camshaft. Can you get a trophy 4-cylinder for a 471 blower? That's what the guys were asking on the Playing in Traffic channel. They wanted to see a 371, which would be even weirder. But somebody did a manifold for that. You know, you could make one. No, he's not unhappy. He's very happy. He's happy because mom's home. What cam would you put in a 5.7 Hemi? I have cam test up. The little 260 did good, but they have newer versions now. I would put something mild in it if it was mine. Rat rod motor idea, 5 liter straight 8. Straight motors with like straight 6s with twin turbos on them, I think look really good. Direct drive electric motor has less power loss. Oh, is that why they're not using transmissions on there? Stuck. Small block Chevy with a 671 blower. At what boost level should I consider pinning or dual key the crank pulley? I would do it anyway. It's so easy anymore to put another pin in it. And I would pin the oil pump too. That's interesting. Okay, we're going to shut our poll off because it's time for me to get going. Is it impossible to make 600 NA horsepower with a stock bottom end 4.8 liter? 60% are enthusiastic and think that would be possible. I would kind of like to see that. Quite honestly, I'd be really happy with getting over 500 with a stock bottom end because I just think you're limited by camshaft. Someone familiar with grinding max area super stock cams? Yeah, they'd be like rectangular lobes. Yours will be the last one. I just want to thank you for your video. My son and I built the 5.3 VTR Truck Norris comp cam gold rockers, 176s with TBS intake, 706 heads. Nice. And on that note, it's time to go. I did a morning one. I did a regular video. I did the playing in traffic podcast, and then now this one. It's time to go. Time to go. We were talking about that on the podcast, that it's great that those guys were saying that they too also always look forward to coming on and talking with everybody. And I was telling them what great guys we have on the live feeds and that there's a lot of good information here, lots of sharp guys that also add to this, because I'm not the only one that's answering questions here. We got a lot of sharp guys here and guys that know different things than I do, transmissions and whatever it is, that guys come on with questions. And I'm like, I'm probably the wrong guy to ask about that. But lucky for you, there are other people here that you can ask that question and they'll probably have an answer. So that's why the live feeds are kind of so awesome. So thank you guys for that. And on that note, I will see you all tomorrow.